Adam22, welcome to Clickbaited.
Happy to be here.
Today what we're going to do is we're going to sit and look through some headlines that we've wrote and other people have wrote about you over the years.
Okay.
Read the first headline, please, on the screen.
Adam22 is creating a reality show where a winning contestant gets to sleep with his wife. That did happen. Yeah.
That did happen.
That did happen.
Can you talk us about how this idea came about, and I guess even down to executing it, because it seemed like quite a big production.
Yeah, that was the biggest production thing that we've ever done. It cost a lot of money. We had to rent a big-ass mansion. We had to pay all these different characters and male porn stars, et cetera, to sort of be on camera. And that was cool, like having that experience of doing something that was so big in comparison to this, which is so simple. But, yeah, after we did the scene with my wife and Jason Love, and that was like one of the most viral things I've ever been attached to, or actually probably the most viral thing I've ever done, we decided, what's going to be the next step? Like, what can we do to really make it exciting? And I said, okay, what about your first threesome with me and another guy? What if we create a reality show based around finding that guy? And we did it, and it actually was super viral, and it really did the trick. I do want to say rest in peace to Jay Hefner, who's the second guy from the left who lost his life about a year ago. Rest in peace. And also free Crip Mac, who's in the photo as well. He's been locked up for about a year and a half now. But, yeah, we just, thought that it would be sort of the next evolution of doing this crazy-ass style of content.
And was that your kind of first foray into doing porn with Lena then?
I sort of got into porn just naturally with her. Like, as soon as I started dating her, we sort of realized, like, we're sexually open in a way that a lot of people aren't. I remember, like, one of the first times we had sex, we FaceTimed someone that we were mutual friends with, and we're just sort of getting it in with them in communication. And then started out with her just saying, like, hey, are you down to fuck me and this girl together on Wednesday night? And I'm like, yeah, just put it in my schedule. I'll be there. And then that sort of evolved into us starting the Plug Talk podcast, plugtalk.com, $5 for your first month. I don't think I was actually looking into one of your cameras right there. But yeah, like it's just sort of, I don't know, we just sort of grew into it. And I feel like with me and her, we both look at the money that we're both making as just, the family business. And this is just what we're doing to be able to afford our lifestyle. And I think that she very much sees a future in which she takes a step back from porn and is able to, just garden and be a mom and cook and do all the kind of stuff that she really actually loves. And with me, sort of same thing. I'm 41 now. I still got a lot of energy when it comes to doing content, porn, whatever. But it's like, I'm going to be 51 at one point, and I don't know that I necessarily am going to want to be doing the same shit for the rest of my life. So I feel like when it comes to doing stuff like, crazy viral skit type stuff like the reality show, it's just like, if it's going to really bring in the bacon, why not?
Shooting porn, being a content creator beforehand, and now getting into porn, how do you treat it? Do you treat it like content? Do you treat it like sex?
To me, it's the same exact thing, honestly. Like, I could sit here and interview some underground rapper for an hour and get a bunch of clips and put it out, read the comments. It's great. Porn is the same exact thing to me, especially because it's a porn podcast. We interview a different girl every week, and then we sleep with her. And it's like, it is slightly different because, you have to think about how you look on camera. You have to, arrange to have like a filmer who actually knows what he's doing there. You have to find different girls each week. Plug Talk is kind of like simpler because we're just putting out one episode per week, whereas with No Jumper, some weeks I'll do 10 episodes, and I'll be on camera basically every waking hour of the week. And, it's different. Obviously, sometimes I'm sleeping with a woman who I find like unbelievably attractive, which is fun on a sheerly animalistic level. Right. But it just doesn't feel that different. It's a little bit more hedonistic, but tomorrow I have to do a Plug Talk scene, and then Wednesday I have to do 2 Plug Talk scenes. So, it's just always, it doesn't really feel that different than if I was just interviewing some rappers, although it does have this sexual enjoyment component.
You talked about how you're financially secure yourself, and obviously Lena's very financially secure through her work as well, but No Jumper's, quote-unquote, going broke. How important is Plug Talk for your personal income?
There's been times where Plug Talk was by far more profitable, and then there's other times where No Jumper's way more profitable. There's been times where my wife was making way more money from her OnlyFans than No Jumper was making, and there's been times where No Jumper was making way more than her. So, I mean, they're both just things I'm committed to, but it's kind of all over the place.
Can you share any numbers about how much you've personally made through porn?
Through porn, I will say millions, but I don't really like to get super in depth in that regard.
No, you don't have to get in depth, but you say millions, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing it for 4 years or something like that, so for sure, yeah, it's been good to us.
What's your family think of you doing it, and Lena, etc.?
They just don't say anything about it. They don't really mention it. They don't really talk about it. My parents are kind of just like really normal. Really, like the one time that they mentioned it was when the Jason Love thing was going on, and there was an article in the New York Post, which is kind of a big deal, and it was about me buying Lena a Lamborghini to reward her for doing her first scene with another guy, which, full disclosure, was a skit. It was fake. I thought that up. It was just like an idea that popped in my head, like, oh, this will be so funny. And so we did that.
So viral.
Yeah, and it was super viral. It just kind of extended the shelf life of all that. And my mom saw it and was just kind of like, you bought her a Lamborghini? You know, like I come from very humble upbringing, and the idea of spending, a couple $100,000 on a car was very shocking to my family, and I had to tell her that was a joke. And yeah, I mean, she even mentioned it to my dad, I guess, and my dad was like, is it anything? He goes, is it weird like the stuff that he normally does is weird? And my mom was like, yeah. And he goes, I don't care then. I think like he just wanted to make sure I didn't have a murder charge or something insane, But in terms of, like, my parents just don't really want to hear about it. And I think same thing for her. She don't talk about it with anyone in her family. Yeah. They know. They probably gossip about it amongst themselves, but they don't ask us
Do you
for
have
it.
any siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister who's 3 years younger than me. She's probably less shocked than anybody, just because she's seen me being like a very weird content creator attention driven person for all these years. So I feel like it probably didn't really surprise her much at all. Yeah.
Well, look, because we heard you were going broke, we were really concerned. So what we've done is we've put together this box of money. What we'd like you to do, Adam, is guess how much is in there. If you guess to the exact dollar, we'll give you it.
That seems very unlikely.
Thank God. Trying to keep the production budget down.
And this is not my first foray into this type of thing, because when you're playing poker, you need to be able to look at their chips and sort of like count them up in your head, which this is different, but it seems kind of similar. I'm seeing like a handful of 20s that I think are going to have an outsized impact on this, and I'm not seeing like 20s inside of it. I'm going to say I see 4 20s. Maybe no, yeah, at least 4 20s, and then a bunch of ones. And I'm gonna say maybe there's $41 bills, and in addition 4 20s. So my guess is going to be $120. That's my guess.
We'll tell you at the end. Okay, so here's another topic.
Adam22 reveals hardest part of interviewing rappers on No Jumper podcast.
You kind of quoted and said, a lot of dudes just grow up with the codes of the streets embedded in them, where the rules are you don't talk to people you don't know, you don't talk on the record, you definitely don't talk on camera. What's the most challenging part about interviewing these guys?
The most challenging part, I mean, it's just thinking on your feet and just constantly running the algorithm in the back of your brain about like what's the most interesting thing that I could be talking to them about at this moment. What's all the stuff that I have to check off before I can really consider this interview complete? And in addition to that, you have to be nimble enough that if they say something that takes you by surprise, that you're still able to sort of ask the appropriate follow-up questions and dig a little deeper than a lot of the other interviewers out there, because there are a million interviewers out there, but a huge percentage of them are basically just reading a list of questions, no offense, and don't really like know how to pivot off of your answers, which I think personally is the difference between like a stock interview and a great interview, is like just how you adapt as it goes along.
When it comes to these rappers and it comes to the challenging conversations that you have, are you ever a little bit kind of concerned about what you're going to ask or how it might be perceived from the other side?
Yeah, I mean, I try to like have sort of an order of operations, which is like I want to start out talking about your early life, where you came from, what made you the kind of person that you are, which again is something that I see sort of subpar interviewers failing at sometimes, is that they just try to dive right into the gossipy stuff right from the beginning. And it's like, I feel like if I spent 45 minutes talking to you about stuff that is more indicative of who you really are as a person, that by the time I get to like, okay, let's talk about you beating a murder charge on self-defense. That,
Right.
like at a certain point, they feel a lot more respected once they've spent 45 minutes talking about their childhood and their parents and all this other stuff. So I think you got to just know the natural flow of the interview and what's appropriate.
Have you always been, because you got into this, 10 years ago?
Yeah,
the podcasting?
Very close to 10 years.
So had you always been good at speaking to people, or is that something that you've developed over time?
It's definitely not something that I really like knew that I was going to be good at, but I remember when I first started my BMX website when I was like 22 that I bought a little like digital recorder off of eBay and went and interviewed a rapper named Desmond Rhodes, aka Black Man, a BMX rider in Brooklyn, and he took me to the roof of his projects, and it was my first time ever marching up piss-drenched project stairwells, and we went to the roof and smoked some weed, and he did a tail whip on the roof, and I interviewed him with that little audio recorder. And in retrospect, I don't know why the fuck I didn't just get a video camera, because like that's one of my biggest regrets, is that I just wish I had realized the power of video a little bit earlier. But I was always just interested in making content, even though we wouldn't have called it that then. And as time went by, I remember I went to Barcelona with a couple of friends of mine, and we had this drunken night, and there was this girl, Michelle, who was like a DJ. I remember just sitting there over breakfast with her and just talked to her for like an hour and asked her a lot of questions and really just kind of dug in and learned a lot about her. And by the end of that, I just found myself thinking like, oh, like what I just did was really something akin to a podcast. Really, it was a conversation, but it just felt like, oh, like there's something there. And that was right around the exact time that I discovered Joe Rogan's podcast in like 2012. And that also just kind of struck me as like, oh, I could kind of do what he's doing, but I have all these BMX riders and underground rappers and porn stars and all these other clothing designers, etc., in my orbit. And so that's why I think I was lucky to have that sort of first movers advantage in comparison to a lot of people.
What's your favorite type of guest? Because you have such an eclectic mix. You have every single type of influencer. You have, as you say, porn stars, rappers. You've even had comedians on. So what's your favorite type of guest to interview, and what's the hardest type?
The hardest type are the young rappers with no home training that just don't know what the hell they're talking about. Although sometimes those can be great because they're just kind of off the cuff and they don't know what is taboo, or they don't know like what is the kind of stuff that the average person would not want to talk about on camera. So a lot of those can be great. But I do love interviewing somebody like, a Van Lathan or a Andrew Schultz or a Joe Budden or a Academics or a Vlad, just people who are kind of like more on the same level as me conversationally.
And what is it that drives you to continue making podcasts, continue making all this content?
Really, it's just like the one thing that I feel like I'm mega specialized in. I know a lot of people who take their time and effort and put it into developing products and selling stuff or creating clothes or doing all this kind of stuff, and it just doesn't really feel right for me to sit around doing business stuff all day. Like I love having an audience. I love entertaining that audience. I love reading the comments afterwards and just sort of seeing how much it spreads and having some random conversation that you didn't even think was all that interesting go viral. Like that whole process is just something that I've always kind of been in love with. And I think no matter how financially stable I am, I'll probably want to keep doing that until I'm old and gray.
Nice.
Although the beard dye is going to stop me from going old and
Yeah,
gray.
I've had to start plucking a few of mine out. It's a bit worrying.
Yeah, that only lasts so long before you're like, okay, this is an invasion. Maybe I just need to dye these things.
Well, I guess one of the darker sides of interviewing all these young rappers is unfortunately there has been a number of people who have ended up dying, guests that have been on this show. How does that impact you? And, which I guess has any had a really big impact on your life?
The early ones were definitely like some of the most impactful ones. And there was definitely a big chunk of my life where it felt like, oh, anyone I get close to in the podcasting space is ultimately probably going to be taken away from me. Like one of my biggest influences early on was this podcaster named Combat Jack. Was like a little bit of an older guy, and he was one of the first hip hop podcasters, and he died of cancer pretty early on in my whole trajectory with this thing. But he believed in me really early on, so that was a tough one to take. Lil Peep died from a fentanyl Xanax when I was, I guess it was like 2018 or 2017. I kind of forget. But that was a big moment where I was like, oh, I got to stop fucking around with drugs and get serious about my life because this is just not a game. And then, but at least that was like a teaching moment, because then like a year later or 6 months later when XXXTentacion got killed over, just a botched robbery, that was like, oh, there's not much for me to learn from this. This is just pure human cruelty. And then even when Draco the Ruler got killed a couple of years after that, that was another brutal one where there's just such a massive influence on me and so many people around me. And I hate to admit it that I'm very, very calloused when it comes to people losing their lives at this point. That being said, there's still plenty of situations that hit hard.
We'd love you to do your Mount Rushmore of podcasters.
Right. I mean, within the hip-hop realm, I'm just going to say that even though he's more known as a streamer, Academics is definitely somebody who really broke the door down, even though he was like comparatively super young compared to me and a lot of his peers with the streaming and the content creation from super early on. So I think he's like the most obvious one. And then if you look at DJ Vlad, he pioneered hip-hop interviewing because he, had just been doing that for so long before everybody else. So I got to give it to him. I'm going to put myself on it realistically, just because I feel like I kind of broke the door down for like underground interviews in a way where Vlad was more focused on, interviewing everybody surrounding the Tupac murder. Whereas then I'm doing all the SoundCloud rappers and all these street kids and everything like that. So I feel like I had a pretty important role in all of it. And in addition, sort of ushering in this like gonzo madhouse type style of content where we just have like a huge cast of characters that are coming on stream on a consistent basis. And I think that was a massive influence. And then when you look at Joe Budden, I think he was a real pioneer in the whole model of just like a couple of friends sitting around having a conversation. And then I also think business-wise, you have to give Joe Budden credit because while people like me and Vlad were focused on making money off YouTube AdSense, Joe Budden very early on realized the power of something like Patreon and, has like a very impressive business as a result that's not nearly as influenced by the whims of the algorithm.
Well, you're very strong in interviews, but let's test how strong you are in real life. I have here a grip strength test. So for reference, I get around 120, 130 pounds when I do it.
Okay. I'm going to stand up. All right. Here we go. Never done one of these. Wow. 102.
Yeah, you could do it again. You can do
stronger
than that, yeah.
That's not good? That's not good? All right. 1, 2. Well, I got another 5 pounds. 107.
107. That's pretty decent.
Shit.
That's pretty decent. So
you're stronger than me. I didn't know.
Well, I think it's just...
I wouldn't agree to this interview.
It's all right. You'll be straight in the gym after this. It'll be fine.
All right. Yeah, I got to think about that a little bit. That's going to be haunting me for the rest of the day.
Okay. Next headline, if you could read it first, please.
No Jumpers Adam22 held up at gunpoint during a live stream.
Can you tell us about what happened here?
So I was sitting in the back of my old store on Melrose in, I guess, 2018, and we were doing one of these late night music streams where people were donating, I think, $75 for us to listen to their music. We're all hanging out, me and a couple other guys. We ordered food. One of my guys goes outside. He grabs the food. He's bringing it in. He's putting it on the table. He's starting to open up the bags of food, and some guy had been lurking in the alley with a mask on, and he crept in through the door while it was open for a second with this gun and runs at me and says, "Give me all your fucking money," and points the gun at me. We end up in a encounter of some sort where I'm trying to pull the gun out of his hand, everything like that. And what people can't see in the clip is that my dude who was with me had his gun out and already had his gun pointed at the dude's head.
Right.
For whatever reason, didn't pull the trigger, which would be a very, very different story because that was a free body right there. As Chief Keef told me afterwards, he goes, "That was a free body," which really stood out to me. That Chief Keef was basically telling me that we weren't murdersome, I don't know. And so Eventually, the guy was taken to the ground. Actually, I didn't hit him for some reason. I just went over and ate the steak and just tried to act like nothing happened. But a couple of my friends beat the shit out of him, knocked him unconscious. We called the cops. The cops came. They dragged him off the ground, took him out of there. They figured out, they informed us that this was not a real gun. It was a prop gun of some sort with duct tape on the handle. And as far as I know, that was the end of it.
When it happened, you kind of smiling almost, kind of laughing. It didn't seem like a normal reaction to someone pulling a gun on you.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind when he walked in?
So there's a big chunk of my mind that was thinking like, oh, this is a prank, which is kind of silly in retrospect. Like,
especially if he had his head blown off right next to you.
Yeah, I mean, who cares if it was a prank? It's a scary situation regardless. But definitely there was part of me that thought that it was not real just because I'd never been involved with anything like this. So I'm kind of like giggling. I think like part of my brain just didn't want to acknowledge that this was serious, and I was kind of giggling, which would have been weird if, at the end of that clip, the guy shot a gun into my head and killed me on camera. That would have been probably one of the craziest clips in the history of the internet. But yeah, I don't know. I was kind of just nervously laughing.
So now we're not in Melrose and we're in a different location in LA.
Yeah.
Do you feel a bit safer compared to being there?
Very, yeah.
And what do you think? What do you think went wrong down there?
What went wrong in that situation? I mean, I think that was the end of me living in this sort of oblivious cloud of just thinking that nothing could happen to me, because you got to understand that when we went to Melrose, I was basically just a regular guy, and then you fast forward like a year and a half, and I'm like so famous that I can't even go out on the street on Melrose without being swarmed by people and people pulling over to take pictures with me and people getting in car accidents and looking at me on the side of the street, which if you're not super familiar with me, it probably sounds like I'm talking out of my ass, but it really did get like super crazy at a certain point. And realistically at that time, we were barely having guns around. We definitely didn't have security, anything like that. So, I mean, in retrospect, live streaming where everybody knows where we are late into the night, everybody's high as hell, everybody's just chilling, nobody's really thinking about the potential threat. That's very different than how we manage our stuff now. And when I think about it, something was bound to happen. We were just out there lacking. Anything could have happened at any given time. And so,
To be honest, that's something I feel like is pretty common with like influencers that are up and coming. They don't necessarily think about the potential dangers. Have you seen that as well? Have you had to advise people as well? Like, you need to start taking your security seriously because what you're doing right now isn't good enough? With
rappers especially, yeah, because, I mean, a lot of rappers are just kind of outside without security. They might have a gun on them. Their friend might have a gun on them, but it's not really like the same level of security that they maybe need. But then you also look at a lot of up-and-coming content creators like somebody like Neon or Aiden Ross. I mean, they're not going out doing these all-day IRL streams without security, which I think is probably a good development. But at that time, I did have a guy with a gun with me, but it wasn't really enough to manage that situation. I just got super lucky that the gun wasn't real, because realistically, if somebody had a similar plan for me, they probably could have easily pulled that mission off. But I was lucky that I got a warning right there, because it very easily could have gone from like me never really worrying about my security to me getting my head blown off on live stream. Like, no warning, just from 0 to 60, so I don't know.
Okay, let's check our next headline.
Fight breaks out on Adam22's No Jumper podcast between Almighty Suspect and Lil Kelpy. Okay, so I was doing an interview with an up-and-coming pimp, little white kid from Orange County by the name of Lil Kelpy, and I was doing the interview with my co-host, Almighty Suspect, and at least one of the rules in the streets, I guess you could say, is that if you are in that world, especially the pimp world, you're just really not supposed to call each other bitch. Bitch is a bad word for them. It's a big deal. And Lil Kelpy called Suspect a bitch, and Suspect promptly stood up and fired on him. And a lot was made of me not getting out of my chair fast enough. To be fair, I was smoking a lot of weed at that moment. And it did take me a couple extra seconds to realize that this was seriously happening. But
it was also quite a big studio space at the time as well.
That was right here, but we had chairs as opposed to the desk. Yes, because now at least there would be a desk stopping the violence. At the time, it was chairs, so it really made it easy for him to
That's why we've got this here, just because I was scared you might
Yeah, I was worried that something might happen. I was worried for myself, yeah. I don't know if I could control myself.
Do you think it was a good or bad thing that the fight happened on the podcast?
It ended up being okay because we were able to censor it. We got Kelpy to sign something saying he wasn't going to sue us. Then we put it out. It was one of the most viral clips we probably ever had. That being said, it also kind of created like an image for the podcast of being a place where unprofessionalism sort of reigns and a lot of wild stuff happens here, which is not all the way good. You know, it's like this is a wild place. This is a place where crazy things happen, but I definitely don't want anybody to feel like there's any serious chance of violence taking place. So, you know, part of me wanted to not put it out, but once we got him to sign the form saying that he wouldn't sue us, it was kind of like, well, shit, how are we going to avoid this? I don't know.
When you bring guests on then, you know, we kind of briefly touched on it before, making sure you're not saying the wrong thing, making sure you're respecting their boundaries, etc. But there has been people who have tried to kind of also fight you or at least aggressive towards you. What do you think in that scenario? What's going through your mind if someone's getting more heated, getting more aggressive, and you feel like it could be violent confrontation? Are you willing to kind of back down from your point in order to diffuse the situation?
Historically, I don't feel like I typically back down in a situation where I feel like I'm right. I just feel like I need to, you know, have an environment where there's security or there's people on hand who can handle the situation, because I'm not really from my perspective, when I sit down with someone, we're entering into a contest of words, and there's nothing in me that feels like this should necessarily turn into a violent affair. So if somebody wants to take it there, I'm not going. I'm just not, you know, that's not how this should go from my perspective. If you feel like you're losing the argument, then I don't think that turning it into a violent confrontation is a fair exchange. I wouldn't have agreed to sit down with you if I thought that you were going to start trying to fight me as soon as we ended up with a disagreement. So
yeah, I think you're safe. Don't worry.
Yeah. Oh, with you, yeah. But now that I know that you're much stronger than me, I don't know.
Yeah, but I'm also a lot shorter. So
okay. A little trade-off, yeah.
Yeah, a little trade-off. Okay, cool. Let's move on to our next headline.
YouTuber Adam22 reveals problems that forced him to close his store.
You know, if we're being totally fair, you know, a lot of people will know you for porn, right? Because of all the viral clips. Then people know you as a podcaster. But the last is BMX, right? It's like a huge passion of yours, something that you grew up on, something you created content around originally. Can you tell us a little bit about your BMX story and how it came to fruition and where you're at now with it?
Right. So when I was like 12 years old, a lot of the cool kids in my neighborhood at my junior high rode BMX bikes. I thought it was unbelievably badass and cool. So I got one, started riding, going to the trails, just hanging out. Really, I kind of like learned to be a man on a bike. It was really my kind of vehicle to leave my household at that time, and got just absolutely obsessed with the media side of things, from magazines and videos all the way to like message boards and stuff like that. And somehow when I was very, very young, when I was 22, I started a blog called The Come Up. Within 6 months, I basically went from a completely random BMX rider to a guy running probably like the most influential media source in BMX. It really didn't take very long at all. There was just almost nobody running BMX websites at that time who were doing anything really of interest. So that just became the focal point of my life for like 10 years after that. And I started making videos and doing podcasts about BMX, opened a BMX store in downtown LA, basically just completely put my life into it. And then right around the time that No Jumper popped off was when I was really starting to sort of second guess myself and say, you know, have you done everything that you could possibly do within the realm of BMX? And I started to realize that the answer was yes. So I started putting my time into interviewing, you know, BMX riders and YouTubers and all this kind of stuff, and just started having like crazy success with it, which was perfect timing because I had already, you know, I moved to Los Angeles to basically go out and ride BMX bikes every day and make videos and go to skate parks and stuff like that. And at a certain point, I just realized, like, I don't give a fuck about this anymore. This is just kind of boring to me. So I put in like 20 years nonstop on a bike. Still love watching bike riding, still watch BMX videos like every day. You know, I'll typically like watch a BMX video before I go to bed most nights to just sort of chill out. But as far as me being involved in it, you know, I'm not progressing as a bike rider. Like I just can't do tricks like the stuff that I used to when I was younger, which is probably obvious to a lot of people. But then also I don't know. It's just like time-wise, I would much rather dump my time into doing interviews, streaming, and everything else that I got going on, not to mention being a dad.
Do you miss anything about making the content back then?
I miss how simple it all felt in comparison, whereas like in hip-hop, I'm competing with people that are, funded by massive corporations, and I'm like, I'm making videos about crazy, violent gang members, and I'm competing with people like Academics and Vlad who are super on top of it in terms of being up to the minute in terms of what they're covering and who they're interviewing. It's just a very hectic space, whereas when I was in the BMX world, I really pretty much had the whole landscape to myself. And sometimes I look at that landscape and I'm still like, I could go right back to what I was doing. Like I've been out of it for like 10 years and I still easily feel like I could be the biggest voice in that culture if I chose to get back into it. But it just, at a certain point I just felt like, okay, I did 10 years of just riding for pleasure and then 10 years of running this business, being a big factor in the whole media world / still riding for pleasure. And then I always used to say that when I get to the point where I don't love this shit anymore, I hope that I don't feel like I have to keep doing it. Because I know a lot of people in the BMX industry who realistically that's their only skill set. They're not really qualified to do anything else. And so they're just going to keep doing it for all of time. And that's fine. I get it. I would keep doing it too if it was the only thing I had available to me. But at a certain point, I just feel really, really lucky that I can enjoy and appreciate it from afar.
In that BMX space now, do you fear that you'd get some abuse from all the other activities you do in porn, etc.? Do you think you'd get any sort of like?
There's nobody in that world who could tell me shit. Because I'm gonna be real, like what I make in a day is what like the top BMX participant makes in a year or whatever. It's just not really like nobody in that world could ever like have anywhere near the level of voice that I engage with on a daily basis. It's just like it's just that's part of it. I just feel like I have just become an outsized influence in my world, and if I were to go back to a small thing like BMX, it would just I don't know, it wouldn't feel right.
Talking of money.
Yeah.
Recently, you have announced some big news.
Adam22 reveals No Jumper is going broke as they face lawsuit from ex-employee. Yeah, I made a video that went pretty viral called No Jumper is going broke. And
great headline.
Thank you. Yeah, thought that myself. And I just realized at a certain point that was a great title.
Yeah.
And that if I did make that video, that I would be able to accomplish a few things. I'd be able to be super honest with people about the fact that the business is not in the same place that it was during the pandemic, where all of our numbers were extremely inflated, because a lot of people kind of like assume that I'm still making as much money as I was making during the pandemic because I was kind of outspoken about how well we were doing. So I wanted to be honest about that to the public and talk about stuff like why buying this gigantic building that we're in right now was probably not the wisest financial decision. In addition to that, I wanted to talk about how I was being sued by an ex-employee who basically was doing a shakedown attempt. And that person has certainly gotten their karma since then. They recently got off live stream with tears running down their cheeks, which was kind of pleasing.
Are you able to talk about that?
It's basically just this nerd who worked here for a while, and he left because he thought that he had bigger horizons, that he was going to be able to be a successful live streamer. It turns out that he's averaging like 50 viewers on stream at all times, and yeah, like the audience just turned against him in a crazy fashion and has basically just been shitting down his throat ever since. And it's tough, but he is a piece of shit, and he alienated everybody around him and trying to sue me, costing me all this money to deal with this bullshit when I'm the only person that ever gave this person an opportunity in his entire life. So whatever, I just wanted to be honest with people about that. And then in addition to that, I also wanted to like promote our members feature, where people are able to pay us $5 a month to get early access to all of our videos and stuff like that. So that was basically the idea. I'm going to like give a piece of my flesh, be honest about the fact that there's a lot of difficulties that we've faced as a business. And then in addition to that, tell people about how they could help support us. And I think it was very successful overall, even though, a lot of people, like if you actually watch the video, it's pretty obvious what I was talking about. I was talking about how I'm not broke, but how No Jumper had been losing money. Also, we lost our Instagram account, which we actually recently got back. So a little bit, we're going broke slower now, or even earning money. It's possible. But that being said, yeah, I wanted to sort of air out some of that stuff, and a lot of people sort of like purposely chose to ignore the full context of the video because it's more fun to just say, "Haha, you're going broke." But I also, at a certain point, I just realized like I don't care. I don't really want people to think that I'm this rich guy. It's like at a certain point that was part of my ego, was like wanting people to look at me and realize like, look how successful this guy is. And at a certain point I realized like I don't even want that. Like no matter how good I'm doing for the rest of my life, I promise I'm not going to be out here flexing, which stands in contrast to something I said earlier to you about how good I'm doing. But I just wanted to be real with the people. And I feel like a lot of the podcast hosts out there were sort of appreciative of it. I got hit up by a lot of people, including people that I don't really get along with, who were impressed by me being willing to be honest about those things.
Well, I think as well, speaking from experience, coming from Deserto and creating this video production right now, people think that videos cost nothing to make, but the reality is very, very different. And you look at this building here, I believe somewhere it quoted you spent $4 million on this studio. Mm-hmm. Were you, you've kind of said you regretted it. Were you too ambitious?
So at that time, the pandemic had our numbers mega inflated. We were doing super good on a whole litany of different metrics that you could measure. And in addition to that, we had brought on a lot of hosts, and we were experiencing a lot of success from basically like just having all these different dudes on the podcast, making content with me and without me. Everything was going great. At a certain point, there was a bit of a revolt where a bunch of these hosts sort of started smelling their own shit and feeling like they were the man. And so they left, have not really experienced any success since then, but also kind of showed us the limitations of the business. And I think at a certain point, you just have to be realistic with yourself. Like, if we're creating a couple hours of content per day, what are you going to do? Are you going to scale it to the point where you're creating 12 hours of content a day? Doesn't really seem realistic. And a lot of the costs associated with it in terms of security, in terms of having to pay hosts, et cetera, just really kind of hold that stuff back. And in addition to that, it's like, what really separates us from the average guy live streaming in his apartment and being able to keep 95% of the money? There's been times where people who work for me have shown me how much they were making on YouTube. It's not quite as much as we're making, but it's pretty close. And I have all these crazy expenses, and they're just literally in their apartment making, $50,000 a month off of just creating content on YouTube. And there's definitely been a moment where I realized like, I have to take all my expenses and squash them down as much as possible, because this business is just not one where you can afford to have just crazy overhead.
I guess one of the problems you have is a similar problem to say like Hot Ones, where everyone's kind of Hot Ones is tied to Sean Evans, No Jumper is tied to you. So what do you see the future for this No Jumper and the company in general? And do you want to be more out of the shots and have more people like you have now on your news show?
There was a time period where I thought that the future of No Jumper was just going to be more and more content that didn't involve me on camera. I'm now a little bit more doubtful about that. Like, we do produce some content where I'm not on camera and it does okay, and I think that that's good for us to have at least some element of that, just because it allows us to try out more people on camera, build up hosts without me having to necessarily be there all the time. Like, I don't think that for my own happiness, me being on camera 8 hours a day is for the best. It's like I just don't have that level of energy to contribute, and I do want to do other things with my life. But that being said, I just don't really think it's that realistic for me to like make the business all about me not being on camera. Still to this day, I've never really like discovered a person who I thought was better on camera than me. Like, I've found people who are great in certain ways, but like even me and Whack 100 have like the most popular podcast on the No Jumper platform. And when I went on vacation recently and was gone for a couple of weeks, the episodes he did without me were getting like less than half of the views that they were getting with me on it. So it's like, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm still kind of a key component in what draws people to the channel. But yeah, I think a big part of it is I've just sort of learned to accept that we're not going to create 10 hours of content a day, and that there's not that much to gain from us doing so. Now, who knows? Maybe if we got the right sponsorship or the right streaming contract, we would be more incentivized to do that.
Cool. And obviously you've been going into various other activities, as we're about to discuss.
Coffeezilla blasts Adam22 for launching crypto pump and dump despite warnings. basically someone was hounding me, telling me that they would pay me a large sum of money to do a crypto promotion on my story. I thought it's just a random ad deal type thing. I do ad deals all the time for like, thousands of dollars. Why would I not do something for hundreds of thousands of dollars? I thought nobody was going to care because I'm going to be honest with you. I see a lot of people in my space like Quavo, Moneybagg Yo, all these other I don't even know. Am I falsely putting that on Quavo? I think Quavo did it too. The Baby. They had all kind of done this around that same time, right? And I'm just thinking like, well, if The Baby, who's way more famous than me from my perspective, if he can do this and nobody gives a fuck, why can't I do it? So I did it, and it immediately became a shit show because it turns out that people take me at least a little bit more serious on the internet, I guess, when I do a promotion for a crypto thing than someone like The Baby, which was surprising. I would think that you would be much better off getting your financial advice from The Baby than me. But I did it. I was at the water park when I posted it. It was deleted within a couple hours. Apparently some seedy things were going on in the background. Personally, I don't know anyone who invests in meme coins. It's like, to me, I thought that everybody would kind of get the joke, but it turns out there's a lot of people out there trying to make money off meme coins. So, I guess some people lost money or whatever.
Coffee kind of said he warned you. Were you not concerned when he when he said that?
I mean, to me, it was just like a joke. Like, to me, this carries the same level of weight as when I do an ad for a fantasy sports thing. I feel like every single person that watches my content knows that I don't play fantasy sports. And when I do ads for, those services and I reference Patrick Mahomes or Mahomes, or I forget I'm mispronouncing his name when I do the promotion. And everybody gets it that I'm like doing a promotion that has absolutely nothing to do with any level of expertise. So I felt like, in the past I was doing ads for something that was like a vape, but it's flavored air. And I feel like every single person who watches that ad gets it. That I don't know what am I using a device to inhale flavored air? I'm going to be honest with you. No, I'm not. I felt like everybody would understand that the meme coin thing was similar. But to be honest, like Coffeezilla is kind of a grifter himself because he just sort of like he makes a lot of money off making content about all of these little mini meme coin disasters. And for me, I didn't take it serious at all. And even like when I made that No Jumpers Going Broke video, I didn't see any comments that said you did a crypto pump and dump. Want to know why? Because the crypto meme coin market and my actual audience overlap like almost not at all. So for me, it was just like, what the fuck do I care? I still don't care right now.
Do you regret doing it at all?
No, the money felt good. I guess I regret not doing it until after the recent crypto crash that really took away a lot of the profits from that. But that being said, I do have people hounding me to do it more. And it almost is like, well, now that I've already shown that I have no level of expertise in this and that there's no reason to trust my crypto meme token advice, maybe I should just do it like 10 more times and nobody will be able to really hold it against me. But I have been turning down a couple people in my DMs over and over because I just don't feel like dealing with it, but maybe I should.
When do you think you stopped caring about what other people think? Because that is obviously a common theme that I get from you, and you've even mentioned that in the past that wasn't the case. So when did that change?
It's just like being in the public eye for damn near 10 years and just progressively having people say worse and worse things about you, as well as the internet itself just becoming more and more toxic. I just feel like you have to get used to it at a certain point. And when I think back to 2017 or 2018, it's just like I can remember times where I had my day ruined because of a tweet about me that got, 5,000 likes. And, when I think about that, it's like, who the fuck cares? Like, what does that have anything to do with you? And so now it feels like a superpower that I can have a viral tweet or a series of viral tweets about me, talking shit about me that have, millions and millions of views and likes or whatever, and that I just honestly don't give a fuck. So, I don't know. If anything, it just feels like I've kind of developed a lot as a person. And sometimes I see people, like I know a girl who recently was talking about wanting to kill herself because her house got robbed. And I was just like, oh, man, like, I've been through way worse than that, and I didn't give a fuck. So it's just like I feel like your callousness to what people say about you is an important characteristic in terms of how durable you are. So I actually take a lot of pride in the fact that were I to be canceled tomorrow, that it probably would not rise to the occasion of me really having to give a fuck.
Well, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Okay, let's go on to our last headline.
Ice Poseidon and Adam22 hosted boxing event at the same time as KSI versus Logan Paul. Is that true? Because it might have been like the same day or around the same time as KSI versus Logan Paul, but I remember having to get up very early in the morning for that. I remember getting up at 8 a.m. or some shit to go and host this like live stream boxing event, and I was talking on the mic or filming or whatever, but it wasn't at the exact same time because normally actual fights are at night. Although it was in the UK.
It was in the UK.
Maybe okay.
So I think maybe that's why you had to get up early.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why Ice Poseidon would want to run it at the exact same time. I would think it would be better to run it like right before.
Well, I think it's because obviously it was pay-per-view, so there was a lot of people that were having to pay for that fight. Right. But obviously there'll be a lot of people. But this is an interesting topic. That this is the first article we ever actually wrote about you.
Oh.
And apparently you had people fighting in a down and dirty boxing gym.
It was grimy as fuck. It was super filthy. I didn't have anything to do with organizing it. I wasn't even paid to show up. I just showed up because I figured it would be a viral, funny thing to be a part of. Yeah.
Well, this leads me to the main talking point, the real reason why we wanted this headline in there. 100 guys versus a gorilla.
Right.
You've been talking about this on social media. I want to get your take on it. What do you think's happening?
So, at first, I thought for sure that there was no way that 100 dudes would be able to, in any way, do any kind of damage to a gorilla. I asked ChatGPT, and they said that the gorilla would probably kill, or at least like seriously wound the first like 20 or 30 guys, but then eventually at some point, if they were to really kind of like intelligently swarm the gorilla, that they would probably be able to do some serious damage to him. Even though I trust ChatGPT with like almost everything, I still think this is bullshit. Like, I don't really, like, what am I going to do? I'm going to walk up and punch a fucking gorilla in the eyeball. Like, I just don't really feel like, and once it's killed 30 of my friends, then what am I going to do? And like, granted, maybe like 100 Brock Lesnar's would be a lot better than 100, tiny malnourished streamer kids. But I don't know. ChatGPT says that 100 men could do it. I really still have my doubts.
Well, I think it's difficult when it comes to AI because I asked Grok 100 Tysons and also 100 LeBrons. It said with the LeBrons that they wouldn't be able to do it. But then with the Tysons, it said the Tysons would overwhelm it. So that to me is a bit confusing. I think it's just not very clear. But, Mr. Beast obviously joked about making a video about it. But I think unless you have sort of AI simulation, then there's not really any way that you can even simulate it.
It's a fucked up world we live in which killing 100 people for a YouTube video is considered immoral and inappropriate and will probably be removed from the platform. Personally, I think it's a great idea. I think that really we should take 100 men who are on death row or who are doing life in prison, and if they're down, they get to do this. And but you can't just like free them as a reward. They're killers.
And they'll have just killed it.
They're just going to get out and they're going to kill people, and then you're going to be held accountable. But I wish there was a way that we could actually do this experiment.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to lead to simulation. Could 100 Adam22s beat a gorilla in a fight?
I'm not even as strong as you, so I don't think so. I feel like I've never felt like my fighting ability was my strong suit. So I think, if anything, probably.
And definitely not your fighting reaction time.
No, definitely not. I definitely think 100 Mike Tysons, though. I mean, Mike Tyson, really, like, how strong could a gorilla's jaw be? Because really, you just need like to distract the gorilla enough that you're able to land like one killer punch on his jaw, then he's knocked out, and then everybody's punching the fucking gorilla in the head, and you just obliterate him. I mean, that seems like at some point one of the people would be able to land that killer punch on the gorilla. That being said, I also feel like the gorilla's jaw is probably like 100 times stronger than the strongest man.
Well, yeah,
right?
So gorillas are, I think it's 20 to 30 times stronger than a human.
That's a real problem. Like, have you ever even seen like 10 dudes trying to jump somebody? Like I've been jumped having like, 6 guys beating the shit out of me, basically trying to kill me with their fists. And I'm sort of in a ball and covering my head up, and like they can't really do that much when you're curled up in a ball. Now if they have knives, if they have bats, now we're talking. But it's hard to beat the fuck out of somebody in a big group.
Probably a lot of friendly fire as well, unintentionally,
Yeah, probably. But I don't know. I mean, to me it's all about the jaw, or maybe the skull. Like if you really like, how hard are you gonna have to hit? Like is Mike Tyson hitting a gorilla in the head really enough to knock it out? Because at some point, if the gorilla's worried about dealing with 5 or 10 other guys who are on top of him, then that one punch, like, is that gonna really do the trick? I don't know.
The only thing I thought is maybe the gorilla would lose stamina. Like that's I don't know how much cardio they do.
I feel like they probably have 100 times the stamina of the best heavyweight boxer on earth. I don't know.
All right, well, Adam, before we end, I'd like you to take the cap off and then undo the
I guess 120.
You guessed 120. Now, I think you'll be a little sad at your answer.
Ooh, 141. But I was in the ballpark.
When you said 41, I thought, fuck, he's just gonna add 41 onto the 100. And
if I had seen an additional 20.
Well, Adam, thanks for taking the time out to do Clickbaited.
My pleasure.
Please make sure you suggest your audience to like and subscribe.
Yes, please like and subscribe this content as well as the content that I produce for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Peace.